G'day, this is the second part in making up a replacement cross-slide nut. That's the old one there, and as I said in the first part, that thread is pretty much worn out, at least on one side of the nut, and so I had to make up a new one. So the cutting of the thread is done in the first part, and then it's a matter of putting on the shape to get the general form correct. Some people say, well, why bother? Well, yeah, that's one way of looking at it. But when making up something like this, you need to have the shape around about right so it fits in the same place. It's an interesting little challenge, and the reason that I've documented it is to show that actually it's not that daunting. Some people say, oh, it's very complicated, you need CNC, you need all that sort of stuff. You don't. This is done in 3 setups, and not that difficult. Unfortunately, I forgot to film the first setup and just went straight to the machined part, but that's okay. The stub shaft that I made up for the cutting the thread got double duty. I part that off because I've got a centre in one end and a diameter there which is concentric with the thread. That gave me a great way of setting up. So for the first operation I had that in there, and I was able to line up on the centre. And for subsequent operations where I had to do the other bore, as you'll see, I put that in and used the stub shaft to line up. I could have used the centre, but that was the way I did it, so it makes it easy. The other thing worth noticing too is that in this I followed reasonably well the getting it started sort of principles. I started out with the thread, put a mandrel in there to support that, and then face that off to match. So basically, my main datums were done in relation to each other, and then everything else was done around that. The 2 mounting holes were done in that same setup. So basically I put in all my key features, sorry, let's rephrase that. I put in the other key features in relationship to the bore at the same time. So basically that was supported, as you'll see, and then that was faced off and brought to around about the height it needed to be. And the reason I say roundabout is because I'm not quite sure what that height should be. It needs to be fitted to the machine. The 2 holes were centre drilled. I didn't drill them all the way through. I centre drilled them first in that same setup. So basically all my primary datums, my functional features were put in the one go, and then it was just a matter of using that primary feature to locate the centre for cutting in the forms. Off we went. Here we are at the mill. I've got my block on the lead screw, and the fit is such here that on the clean section of the lead screw it spins on reasonably well. On the section with a bit of build-up of paint and muck on it, it's pretty tight. So I think once this lead screw is oiled and kept relatively clean, this lead screw should give some quite good backlash. However, what I've done here is I've got the lead screw, I've got that on V blocks and on 1, 2, 3 blocks on both ends, and so that's holding that basically parallel with the bed. I've got the nut on there, and I'm going to take a skim off that to give myself a reference surface which is going to be basically square to the block. It'll be square to the end surfaces too, because the end surface is hard up there, although I've got a bit of card in there. But the idea behind that is just that way I know that there's no tip that way. There shouldn't be, but rather than have that problem, we'll fix it now. Once I've got that, I can then square up the other sides with respect to this one, and fingers crossed then I've got a fair chance of getting this thing so it's square to the screw. So here's the nut with the first stage of the profiling done.
This is a device called a Volstro head. They were made originally for Bridgeport mills. This one came to me broken, and I've replaced the R8 spindle in there with an ISO 40. But it's got a slide this way and a rotary stage this way, so it enables me to basically centre up on a boss, for example, and run round, and then when I get to the appropriate angle I can go out and do other things. So for shaping like this, it's either do something like this or use a rotary table with lots of setup. So I'd already started actually to mill that down so I can then come around and do that profile, and then I realised in the original nut there's a radii in the corner, and it's there for strength reasons as well as that's what castings do, I suspect. So I really want to put a hole in there. So the way I'm going to do that, I put a small lip on there, and I was going to use that for centering up when I got round to doing this side. But what I can do is I can run my dividers around like so, and on the other side as well, and then I'll do the same here, putting that on the line that I've got from a bottom piece, and that gives me the centre line for an M8 hole, which I can then drill down in there and just relieve that corner, and that corner will be done. I can then machine up to that at the start of that radii. I can machine around here, and I'm not going to have a little pocket in there where I'm going to get lots of chatter and all the other things that you don't want. Between now and the previous bit of footage, there was a battery went flat in the camera, so you've missed all the fun. However, what I've done is I've roughly trimmed off the sides of the boss here. I've got this set up on a bit of angle. In here is that bit of stud shaft that I made. Its last service to this project is basically I've parted off the stock, because this diameter and the screw were done on the same setting. That should be concentric. So what I'm going to do here is set this up with an indicator on the spindle and run around, and so I get this centered on the table, and then I can use the rotary table to run a cut around and get that concentric. I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that this diameter and this diameter will be concentric, but if they're not, I'm just going to have to dress that up a bit. Then there's going to be a whole lot of filing to make sure that everything matches up and to get rid of some of the dings. The reason I'm using the rotary table here rather than the Volstro head is that with the Volstro head, you might be able to see there's a couple of nicks there. It wasn't really happy with that depth of cut, and so I'm going to do it with a rotary table. Also, as has been pointed out to me, a number of people don't have, well, a great many people don't have a Volstro head, so doing it with a rotary table is probably another way of demonstrating how these sorts of things can be done. Once that's been done, I'll be going over this, and as I said, dressing this back, making these things flush, cleaning these things up, doing a bit of shaping on the ends here. The original is a slightly lozenge shape. This is flat, so it doesn't. The radii don't quite meet on the ends. So dressing it all up, making it look pretty. And then the last thing will be putting the slot in and the hole for the anti-backlash screw. Not that I think it's going to be necessary in this case. This bit of thread is a beautiful fit in there, so I suspect that there's going to be very little backlash involved. So here we are. I've centered this up using the stub of the screw. This device here is a copy of a thing called a micro Mitutoyo Zero-Wit. Plans are available on the internet, and I made this up, and it's quite handy because it goes in the drill chuck, or goes in a chuck, and then you can wind the indicator in and out and you know, use it for centering. Doesn't matter what size things are. This is a an inter-rapid indicator, and it's 5/10 per division, and I've got this within probably about a thou, which I think, you know, given what it is and what's going to happen to it next, is ample. So I'll now set this thing up with a cutter in there, and then just do a little bit of freeform cutterizing. Here it is, all cleaned up. There's a slight witness mark there, which that'll file sand out. That's not a big problem. A couple of things when doing this sort of work on a rotary table. First of all, have one of your clamps on just a little bit, just to give you a little bit of drag, because if the cutter catches, it can chatter. So it's a good idea to just give yourself a little bit of drag. The other thing is that you need to strictly observe conventional milling, no climb milling. If you climb mill, it is just as likely to grab and twist on you. So yeah, just a couple of things there. I'm now going to attack this with some files and with some emery and all that sort of thing, and we'll come back to it then. So here's the finished nut. As you can see, I've blended the knit line across. It wasn't very much anyway. It was probably, you know, 0.5 of a millimetre or something like that. I've put the slit in for the backlash adjustment, and the screw. I wasn't terribly happy with that because I wasn't careful enough drilling that hole, and it grabbed. But oh well, that's the way it works. The stub shaft. I had to use that several times to clear some of the swarf of the cut out, and it's still not as smooth as it could be. So the cutting, that was just with the slitting saw, has opened up a couple of burrs, or has put a couple of burrs in there, and they'll just have to go, I think, in the usual you know, wearing in of these things. The owner will just have to be a bit careful and you know, maybe give the screw a little bit of a brush and oil for the first bit, just to make sure. But there you go. That's the screw, and I'm reasonably happy with that. So thanks for following along. Hopefully that gives some people some ideas about what they can do with rotary tables and all sorts of other bits and pieces. Thanks to those who've inspired me, and please share if you like what you've seen.